Coming up on this week's show, the best modern Sonic game gets a retro port.
Achievements come to the GameCube.
And we chat Theme Hospital to 2 Point with Mark Webley and Gary Carr.
And the Retro Hour podcast is brought to you every Friday with our incredible mates at Bitmap Books. Now, have you seen the incredible N64, a visual compendium, packed with over 150 titles that defined the classic Nintendo 64 system? They're all in there: Super Mario 64, GoldenEye 007, Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, Banjo-Kazooie, and of course it's got that beautiful artwork that Bitmap Books are famous for. So if you love that, check it out and the rest of their retro gaming collection at bitmapbooks.com. And with our friends at PCBWay. Now, if you're working on something over the summer, you know they offer a fully featured custom PCB prototyping service, low cost, fast turnaround quality boards, and if you're looking for services like 3D printing and injection molding, they've got you covered. And of course, they're massive supporters of the retro community. So you can get an instant quote right now on their website at PCBWay.com. Hello and welcome to the Retro Hour podcast, episode number 437, your weekly dose of retro gaming and technology news with me, Dan Wood.
Me, Ravi Abbott.
And me, Joe Fox.
And great to have you joining us for our weekly retro gaming geek out session every Friday, bringing you up to speed on what's been happening in the world of retro gaming and technology from over the last 7 days. And of course, bringing you veterans of the industry onto the show each week to hear the story about their gaming past. And actually today, let's jump straight into that because we have got an absolutely massive packed podcast this week. Not one guest, but two massive names on the show this week.
Yeah, so we've got the co-founder of 2 Point Studios, and oh my God, they're absolutely amazing. Mark Webley and Gary Carr. You know, these guys came from the Bullfrog days and some of the fantastic titles that we absolutely love. You know, Syndicate? Yeah, they both worked on that. What an amazing
How much time did you sink into Syndicate when you were a kid?
Oh, Syndicate was like an addiction for me. Yeah. It was the first kind of free roaming experience. And, you know, when you had that 4-player little squad and you could take each unit off. And it was just beautiful as well. And the fact that, you know, it ran on the Amiga was pretty amazing. But also, you know, some of the add-ons, it was a multi-system game as well. Came out for the PC. There was that SNES version as well, which was rather weird. But also, there's another game there. You know, Theme Park.
Yeah, I might have heard of that.
Yeah, that's quite big. And Theme Hospital, of course, which, oh my God, Theme Hospital was one of those titles that it was just addictive. Like, you could just pick it up and play at any time and just completely get engrossed. And you originally would think, what a boring subject, a hospital. You know, how are you going to turn this into a fun game? But they really did it at Bullfrog.
It's really interesting hearing their stories as well because they've got a really interesting history. I mean, Gary actually started working at Palace Software. Yeah. And I think the first game we worked on was Barbarian, which obviously was a massive title to jump straight in on. And then when they were working at Bullfrog, Mark was kind of in charge of doing the ports to other systems. Like you mentioned, the version of Syndicate on the SNES that was very cartoony looking, actually, wasn't it? A bit more in the vein of Theme Park.
Same with Theme Park as well, yeah. And I think they had that kind of style where, you know, on the computers it was serious and then it was a bit more cartoony on the consoles.
And Gary actually mentions that he wasn't a big fan of the idea of Theme Park when he first heard about it. But I've got a feeling maybe that changed as time went on because, as you mentioned, they both founded a studio called 2 Point that actually has been acquired by Sega in recent years. And obviously, you know, they worked on the theme games back at Bullfrog, and their recent title is a real spiritual successor to Theme Hospital in particular, isn't it?
Yeah, well, 2 Point Hospital's been out for quite a while, but 2 Point Campus has kind of extended the world and, you know, brought new people in. And we talk about that, like, connection with nostalgia and the older game and, you know, the stuff that worked. Why kind of bring it back and why have a new audience and why are people like Sega interested? And these new games are just fantastic. They've got some other stuff in the pipeline, but we also cover Fable as well. There's so much in this interview. I think you guys are really going to love it.
Yeah, Fable obviously going to be celebrating its 20th anniversary in a couple of months' time, which kind of blew their mind when I pointed that out to them. And obviously Fable 4 is kind of in the pipeline at the moment. So we'll talk a bit about that. And, they're not involved in it, but it's always nice to hear, the guys that kind of started the franchise, how they feel about the new games coming out and the direction that it could be going in. So, two massive guests on the show this week, Mark Webley and Gary Carr, who are Bullfrog alumni and now, of course, involved in Sega, working with their incredible Studio 2 Point. They're going to be on the show in around half an hour from now. But before that, let's have a little catch-up about what's been happening in retro from over the last week, because there has been some massive stories landing on our social timelines over the last 7 days, including something that I think everybody has wanted since this game first appeared. Now, of course, we're going to be talking about a Sonic the Hedgehog game that's getting a port to a classic Sega system. And it's the one that everybody wanted. Sonic Mania could be coming to the Dreamcast by the looks of it.
This might get me to play it.
You've still not played it?
Oh, God.
I've not played Sonic Mania. When did it come out? 2018?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got it. I played it. I'm lying. I have played it for about an hour. So I have it because I played it on one of our After Hours episodes many years ago.
Yeah, you did.
I remember really enjoying it. But the first couple of levels are essentially clones, aren't they? They're kind of like remakes of the original levels. And I remember Ravi saying kind of like, oh, mate, you got to carry on with it. It all goes crazy. And I haven't carried on with it yet. Life gets in the way.
That does surprise me and disappoint me, Joe.
Yeah, I know. And interestingly, they did Sonic Origins a couple of years later, where it was the original games and they kind of spruced up the graphics and everything and put them out on modern consoles. And I played that to death. I did everything in that. Yeah, so it makes no sense.
It's funny because whenever you hear about Sonic Mania, fans of like the traditional Sonic games always rate that as like the best one ever.
Well, famously, this was the one that Sega bought Christian Whitehead on board, who'd done some absolutely amazing mods before and, kind of embraced
iPhone and stuff, didn't it?
Yeah, embraced the fans. And that's what made Sonic Mania such a standout title. And, it had a lot of that old style. And I think the Dreamcast was perfectly capable of running it. I actually ran it on the Wii U, which is pretty mad. But that was part of this, which is a decompilation of Sonic Mania. So it's been kind of decompiled. Of course, you need the original files and the original assets. But this has also happened to Sonic CD, Sonic 1 and 2. So, you might see Sonic CD on the Dreamcast. If it's not already there, I'm not quite sure of the Dreamcast library. But they've posted a capture of it. So what they're actually doing is they're using a thing called Callisti OS, which is basically an operating system and a way of porting stuff. So they're using a software development kit in there. Some games have been ported. They're kind of running the assets over a network at the moment. So they've got a virtual file system on the network that they're capturing the assets from and then, outputting it into the Dreamcast. So at the moment, it's very much in the form of a kind of a patch and a hack, but it's running well. And hopefully they'll be able to do a way that you could purchase the original game and then, somehow connect it up to a kind of build that will then build it for your Dreamcast.
Yeah, we're talking about that a couple of weeks ago, weren't we, with some of these other decompilation tools where, it's literally that, isn't it? If you've got the original ROM file or an ISO file, you can basically put that in and then it will churn out working code that works on the system you intend it for. So hopefully it'll be something as simple as that, like a patch tool. Yes, it's Sonic Freak 94 who are the guys behind this, that's the team name, who've been working on this amazing-looking Sonic Mania port to the Dreamcast. And there's a guy on X called Falco Gurgis who's posted this video, a short little teaser, it's only about a minute long, but showing it running on a Dreamcast emulator. And I think, look at the frame rate on that. It looks like the Dreamcast is not even breaking a sweat, which makes sense. I mean, the Dreamcast was first of all, a 3D system, wasn't it? So it makes sense that it could do these kind of
Well, that's the
games.
thing about these decompilations. All the API, you just need to hook that up and then basically you can run it on whichever system. You need to make sure there's not like bugs and clashes and stuff like that. So they're probably going to go through, clean up the code And, if any community can do that, it's going to be the Dreamcast, isn't it? Because they're so used to modifying and creating games. And I love that fans have already started to produce box art, which is just totally Dreamcast straight away.
Yeah, there's another fan of this. Yeah, he's made a Dreamcast style, very similar to the Shenmue cardboard sleeve that you got for the Dreamcast. But it's the Sonic Mania yellow sleeve, and it's the Japanese style clamshell game, awesome. And it looks awesome. The artwork he's done and everything is just absolutely fantastic, like that real 90s vibe as well. And there's all like stickers and stuff that come with it, which is amazing that these people are whipping this up this quick as well. I know this has been being made for a while, but yeah, man, this does look awesome. I hope that this does become something tangible. So
maybe it'll be like a cool boot disc style thing where you put it in and then you put the Sonic Mania original in from another system. And then, I don't know if they could get that to work.
I don't think that would work. Can you imagine?
Because to me this is really cool to see, because Sonic Mania always kind of felt like the lost Sonic game that should have come out on the old systems that never did. Yeah. I mean, ideally looking at this, I thought it would have been great on the Mega Drive, but then if you play Sonic Mania, like you said, those early levels are kind of recreations or kind of upgrades of the original Sonic levels. But then something will happen, or an effect will happen, or something like that, and you'll look at it and you'll think, the Mega Drive couldn't have done that. So there are certain bits in the game that definitely wouldn't have been possible.
Yeah, and they had Sonic Adventure, of course, and the original Sonic on the Dreamcast. But Sonic Adventure 2 as well. But having a kind of modern 2D title is kind of well fitting, and I can imagine this is going to hit the Saturn as well. As soon as the Dreamcast has done it, hit the Saturn, guys will be like, right, get on it.
That would be cool to see, because obviously the Saturn is the system that famously didn't really get a decent Sonic game on it, so that would be good to see. But I think in an ideal world, because I'm looking at these like screenshots of the fan packaging and stuff that's been made up, it would be amazing if Sega were as chill as Atari have been recently, and maybe let one of the indie studios, or maybe even work with the guys behind this and put this out as like a physical Dreamcast game. I think they get a lot of love for doing that.
You just don't know with Sonic. You just don't know with Sega at the moment, do you? Because they used to be pretty chill and cool with these kind of things. As Ravi said earlier on, they brought, I forget his name. What's his name?
Christian Whitehead. Yeah.
There we go. They brought him on board from him doing ports and stuff for the iPhone, and they brought him in to work on Sonic Mania. Whereas now, Sega is shutting down fan projects and stuff.
I just think do they care about the Dreamcast that much? Is there that many people that are going to sell it, or is it just going to be?
I guess all Sega would have to say is, do it.
Go ahead.
Got a permission.
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
Which I think, in terms of effort for them, wouldn't say much, but I think
but that might become like, the official Sega release of Dreamcast, the first one. That's a headline grabber, isn't it?
Well, exactly. Yeah, I think it'd get them a lot of positive attention. I think if they did that, even if people didn't buy it, it's a cool thing for Sega to do for the retro community. I think so. It would be awesome to see. So fingers crossed. But as it stands at the moment, obviously a very unofficial fan port. But we'll keep an eye on that. If you want to check out that little teaser trailer, I'll put that in the show notes as well. Now, something else you spotted this week, Joe, and we're actually having a bit of a debate about this in our Facebook group earlier on. Like, is this retro? And you pointed out that, actually, it came out 18 years ago. Wow. This is Dead Rising. It's basically getting a remake.
Yeah, it's a weird discussion, a weird topic. I'm a big fan of Dead Rising.
Huge fan as well, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it.
Yeah. Funny enough, me and Ravi were talking about it once again in the after hours last week, weren't we? And yeah, straight up, is it retro? Because of it's obviously an Xbox 360 game that came out in August 2006. So it's 18 years old next month.
Which, you think when we started this podcast, like coming up on 9 years ago, we'd have covered stuff from 18 years previous and it wouldn't have felt... There'd have been no debate, if we'd have talked about a game that came out.
I plug in a 360 and the noise on that thing, the kind of size of it as well. I think, this is an old console.
Yeah, it gives you nostalgia as well, doesn't it? But yeah, you're right there, Dan. Like, when we started out, the Dreamcast had only been discontinued 15 years prior.
Well, okay, so 18 years before we started this podcast was 1998.
Exactly.
So we'd have talked about stuff from 98, no problem.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can talk about Dead Rising.
Of course we can.
So this has been announced earlier this week. The Dead Rising Deluxe remaster, which will be coming out on September 19th, 2024, and was announced at a Capcom show this week. And it's going to be coming out, interestingly, on all consoles, so PS5, Xbox Series X, Steam, etc. Not the Switch, interestingly. But obviously, the other week I was talking about the Marvel vs. Capcom re-release, which isn't coming out on Xbox. So I don't really know what Capcom are playing up with there. But
I wonder if the Switch maybe, because I mean, the Switch is getting a bit long in the tooth now, and obviously we're waiting for like kind of Switch 2 any day now, at some point this year. Or next. So maybe it's just it physically couldn't cope with the remastered graphics, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. But it's interesting that they've called it, I like that they've called it, DRDR, so Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster. But while they were on stage, Capcom have said, actually, we have actually built this game again from the ground up, so it is more of a remake, the director of the game has said.
Yeah, it seemed like, the way they'd remade Crash Bandicoot.
Yes.
Where they've kept all the original assets and the original character models and styles and levels, but they've kind of given it a shine.
Yeah, they've built over it. They haven't just gone, okay, we're going to polish the graphics. It's as if they've built over the graphics and stuff.
And it's more environmental stuff, isn't it? So, one of the things that I was noticing in the preview was they were talking about the different times of day. The mall always felt a bit like trapped in one period of time.
Yes.
And, having sun go up and down and sunsets and stuff, it's going to change the whole vibe of it, especially when there's zombies in the darkness. And keeping the levels the same. There's I forgot how good some of the bosses in Dead Rising are, and just seeing this trailer again, I'm like, oh my God, that clown dude, there was so many cool characters and wicked levels. I'm glad they've kept that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited for it. Apparently there has been some quality of life changes to it. I did go back because they did make a remaster of this game already in 2016, which they do point out in the preview, in the trailer for it. And I went back and played that over lockdown in 2020, and it hadn't aged too well. It is very clunky, the original Dead Rising. The controls.
See, that's funny to hear, because I played it actually briefly. I remember on After Hours we were talking about, I didn't think I played it, but then I saw it in my collection. Yeah. I was like, I have got this game. And I did remember then playing it. I think I only played it once. When I first got my 360, for some reason, never went back to it. But in my mind, it's kind of looking back then, and those games feel like they've got basically modern game controls. I wouldn't have thought it would have aged that badly.
Well, also, I think, the intelligence of the zombies is going to change. It's going to make it a different game in the way you play it. Dead Rising, you could trick them quite easily. You run around a pillar and jump on something and they're gone. This one, I can imagine they're going to be lurching for you more. They're going to be in places you don't expect.
And it's interesting that you just said that, because of obviously a big aspect of Dead Rising is saving survivors. And as you just said, Ravi, you'd have a survivor following you and you'd run around a pillar and you'd lose them.
They'd just be like, oh,
the
come
AI.
on. Yeah, and you'd have to go back and fight them.
Yeah.
And then bring your survivor through. Yeah, escort them. Yeah,
yeah, and you could actually have up to 8 survivors following you at once. And there was achievements linked to that. And I remember trying to completely platinum this game, get all the achievements, and just having an absolute nightmare with the survivors following me and them just getting ripped apart by zombies. So, as they've said, quality of life improvements. So I think you're right there, Ravi. I think the AI, etc., may be a bit better this time
this
round.
This might give me a whole reason to actually buy one of these modern, consoles. Yeah.
Is it not coming out on Steam then? There's no Steam.
It's on Steam. It is on Steam.
If you're playing Dead Rising, you've got to do it in your living room, though. And,
drag your gaming PC down the stairs.
Yeah, that's it. I don't even have that. I've got a Mac, so I'm completely screwed.
So Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster. Any idea on release date on that yet? Do we know?
19th of September.
Okay, so not long to wait, end of the summer. Yep. So if you want to check out what we know so far, I'll put that in the show notes as well. Now, you did mention that you love getting your achievements there, Joe.
Yep.
You make no secret about the fact you're a bit of an achievement chaser. Must be honest, I've never been that bothered about trophies and achievements and stuff. I mean, when they pop up on screen, sometimes I'm like, oh, cool. But yeah, it's nothing I've been majorly into. I know you've actually played games again and bought them on new systems just to get the achievements, haven't you?
Yeah, it's kind of sad. And it's funny because of I am an achievement hunter, and it kind of ruined gaming for me for a while. Because I only wanted to play modern games. to, hunt achievements. Games I liked. I wouldn't. One of my friends would buy terrible games which have easy achievements on them just so he can get 1,000 points within
My
an hour.
First Pony.
Yeah, those kind of games where it's like play the game, 500 points, like really silly stuff. And going off on a tangent here before we talk about the news story, but a few years ago, a friend of mine was like, bro, nobody cares. Nobody's checking your gamer score, etc. And I was like, you know what? He's right. And I really got back into playing retro and stuff. And then I went on a stag do last year and everybody was adding each other on Xbox. And somebody went, yo, Foxy's got 100,000 points on Xbox. That's insane. And I was like, what?
I've got street cred again.
I've got street cred again. Like a load of 30-year-old blokes get blokes.
But one thing that was quite amazing is, I'd just been playing on Steam. Steam's got a really good achievement system as well. And you earn all these cards and stuff like that. And I was just like looking through it one day and I was like, wow, I've got a lot. And then I'm like, these are actually worth money. And you can sell them on like an open market as well. So
really?
Don't get into Steam, Joe. I think that'll be the end of you. Yeah.
It's funny though, because my little nephew, he lives on Xbox. And a couple of weeks ago, my brother and him, we were having like an online game, playing something. And he was ribbing me for my Xbox gamer score. I'm like, I didn't even know what it was. I was thinking 8,000 or something probably. I've been on there like 20 years. Yeah. And he's like ripping me. And I'm like, how long have you been playing this over the weekend? He goes, I was on 18 hours on Saturday. I'm like, I probably haven't gamed 18 hours of this year. Yeah. Wish I had time to play games that much.
Yeah, I work.
How many hours have you got? Oh, an hour this week.
Yeah, exactly. However, if you do want to combine the best of both worlds, and here's an excuse if you're a bit of an achievement hunter and you want to play your retro games and get a bit of recognition from the achievement system for doing it, the GameCube is getting achievements thanks to the Dolphin emulator.
Yeah, so this is a well-known GameCube emulator called the Dolphin emulator, which is named after the Dolphin. The GameCube's kind of like secret name, wasn't it? Was the Dolphin
codename prototype?
Codename, yeah. And this is an update that is coming to the Dolphin emulator on the 15th of July, which is going to incorporate a retro achievements system. So in the emulation, there will be built-in achievements. At the moment, quite a handful of games, standout games being Super Mario Sunshine, Smash Bros, Wario World, F-Zero, Rogue Squadron, a couple of other games on there. But it's not going to draw me back in because it's even though, like I say, I'm a sucker for achievements, it's through emulation.
Yeah. So I guess you're going to need some like connectivity, and this isn't just available for Dolphin as well. This retro achievements is Win Arcadia Retro Arch as well, which I think is a huge one, because you've got so many supported systems on there. Having that connection on Retro Arch is massive. RAVDB, RA SNES, 9X as well. It goes on, the list does basically. Right. So it looks like that PC SX2 as well, the PlayStation 2 emulator. It looks like it's becoming this third-party achievement for retro gamers and people on emulators. I think maybe with online connectivity and these weird little networks that are getting created at the moment, there might be a way of integrating. I think it will be pretty hard to do, and I kind of like the idea that you've got this database that's maintained separately, so you can get all of those achievements and then connect them on whichever emulator you're using, and it looks like it's going to grow. They're adding more games to the list as well.
Yeah, they're going to add more games to the list, which is cool. So there will be people adding to this constantly by the looks of things. But it'd be interesting just to kind of be like, what's your gamer score? And you go, oh, what, on Xbox? You go, no, on your GameCube. What's your gamer score on Super Mario Sunshine?
What
tell that next time you're out with the lads. Yeah. That'd be really cool. But yeah, I agree with you, Joe. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, it's cool, but the downside is you've got to play it on emulation to get these. And I think, because I wonder, I'm not sure. Obviously, there's a way of doing it, I imagine, but I've never seen it. Getting the GameCube online. I'm sure that was a thing back in the day.
It was.
I don't think it was all that widespread, but I know the Wii, for example. And there are, if you've got a modded Wii, for example, you can play GameCube games on it. And obviously, the Wii is an online connected console, and there are third-party servers for that now that you can connect to.
They might just do an add-on for that. It's third-party, so they could just add on that. But I also think, you're kind of underestimating amount of people that have a little box with everything on it that has RetroArch that they just play on in their living room and don't have all these older systems. And I think this is perfect for that.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, if they could build it into the Wii kind of homebrew scene, so you could play GameCube games and actually get scores on. I mean, it's not the original hardware, again, but it feels a bit closer than running it on emulation, I think. But yeah, cool to see. I think, for the people that are into achievements, very cool. If this was available on, original hardware, Joe, somehow, would you go back and play all your games again to build that score up?
No, that's a question. Yeah, probably. My GameCube's set up anyway with the Resident Evil games out. So, that does get played every now and then when I'm in the old office, when I'm meant to be doing some work. So, yeah, it probably would draw me in, to be honest.
In a way, though, then your missus can look at it and be like, hang on, the achievements give it away, don't they? How long have you been spending on your system?
Oh, she wouldn't know how to check that. I don't think she knows how to check it on Xbox.
I'm going to text her the instructions. So, yeah, very cool, though. If you want to check out more about that, I will link that in the show notes as well. And we're going to be talking to this week's special guests coming up in just a moment, Mark Webley and Gary Carr. And a little reminder as well that we do have a patron for this podcast as well, that if you'd like to support us on there, you get the normal podcast extended each week. We put a couple of extra news stories in there. We've got a couple coming up just for our patrons. You get it ad-free as well, and also you get invited to our wonderful patrons hangouts, of which we had another really good one last weekend. There will be another one at the end of this month, so if you'd like to support the show, all the details to join us on Patreon are on the website at theretrohour.com. So it's one quick story following on from something we were talking about either last week or the week before. We're talking about that resurrected Sega Neptune console that's coming out of that Brazilian company, Carr. So the big news is they're actually making an exclusive game for it. So first of all, Joe, for people that missed the episode, remind us what this is, this system.
So there is a Brazilian company, as many of you may know, there is Tectoy in Brazil who still produce classic Sega consoles, such as the Master System, due to licensing laws and export laws in Brazil. But this is a new company that are going to be creating a FPGA Sega Neptune, which is going to be called the GF1 Neptune, which is based on the Sega Neptune prototype, but it will play original hardware, so Mega Drive games and 32X games, which is what the Neptune was meant to be.
And they did a Neo Geo consoleized as well previously.
Yes, they did. Yeah. That's what they did before. And it will also, I believe, it was going to have Wi-Fi and it was going to have an SD card port on it and stuff like that. But now what they're saying is this is going to be an exclusive game for the Sega Neptune as well, which I think is a little bit of a clickbait if you read into it. So this game is called Sword of the Apocalypse, which, to just touch on the game a little bit, does look like a really nice Mega Drive game, very akin to Shinobi, side-along platformer, very fast, very nice parallax scrolling, really detailed graphics, pixel graphics.
Good music as well, very nice.
Really good music, parallax scrolling and all that kind of stuff, nice and colourful. But if you read into it, it says that it will play on the Mega Drive as well. It'll play on the standard Mega Drive.
So doesn't require the 32X?
It doesn't require the 32X or this new Neptune GF1.
But I guess they might have mega features for it and they might hold back the release,
Yes, so you are right. So it will have an enhanced version on the cartridge.
Right, okay.
So if you play it on the Neptune GF1 or the 32X, you will get enhanced graphics, colors, etc. But it will run on standard on the Mega Drive as well, which is quite cool because I feel like that would have been quite a unique selling point for the 32X games back in the day if they'd done something similar. That, they could. I can't see why they couldn't have done that. Maybe it would have been too costly, in the 90s to have done that. But game-wise, it looks cool. I just thought it was a bit of a funny headline.
It looks really good, actually.
It does look good. It does look really good. And I wonder if it will become one of these extremely rare, expensive.
Yeah, I was just thinking, good luck getting this outside of Brazil in physical form. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting, though, because, there are some people, there is a bit of a thread going on X right now. They've put the trailer on there. And someone instantly replied to it and said, it looks like the sprites have been taken from a DS game called Naruto versus Sasuke, apparently. Right, okay. And then the developers replied to that saying, sorry, I've never heard of that game before. And then, so maybe there's, I don't know if some of the people involved in that are in this, or it's a coincidence maybe. I'm looking at the screenshot side by side. Does look very similar, I've got to say.
That's interesting.
But I mean, it could just be a placeholder maybe. Maybe something they're going to change at some point, but it's interesting to see.
Might have to look into that. Ooh.
Yeah, so I mean, I agree with you. I think, to me, this, I looked at it first of all and I thought, yeah, that looks like it could run on a standard Mega Drive. It looks like a decent modern Mega Drive game.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're obviously only showing the standard 16-bit version at the moment, and they are saying there will be some 32X enhancements for this new system. Either way, I think it is cool that they're not only kind of adding to the 32X library, which, as we know, wasn't all that big, but actually making reasons for people to buy this new FPGA system. I think having an exclusive game library, and very cool, if they put it out so all 32X owners can play it. I think that will be even better. But I think it is good to see. I think, if this does sell well in Brazil, because we did a bit of a kind of a look at Brazil on the podcast about 5 years ago, and we had the guys from Tech Toy on, didn't we, Ravi? You were talking to them and kind of talking about the Sega scene out there, and it is really like its own bubble, really, isn't it?
I don't, I've heard ups and downs about Tech Toy's licensing at the moment, and if they've dropped it or
right,
kind of what's going on in the recent years, but there is a whole Brazilian scene that we're not aware of, and some mad stuff keeps coming out of there, and this is interesting to see. I like that they're launching a console with a launch title as well, and some little bit of exclusivity.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe if Tectoy not doing it anymore, maybe that's why these guys have come in.
Yeah,
to kind of take their place.
Yeah, fill the vacuum.
You always hear that, Brazil is kind of the land where Sega never went away. Very cool. Something else we'll be keeping an eye on if you want to check out that trailer. And, of course, all the rest of the stories. You don't have to Google around. I save you the job every week. Just check the notes section of your podcast app or head to the website. You can click straight through to all the stories from there at theretrohour.com. All right, now, before we chat to this week's special guests in just a moment, let's take a quick second to give a massive thank you to this week's sponsor, and this is our wonderful friends at ExpressVPN. Now, you might be thinking, I don't know if you guys are the same, you kind of look at your bills every month, kind of feels like Netflix announce a price hike like every 3 or 4 months at the moment.
Yeah, definitely.
Like pretty much doubled since I signed up about 10, 15 years ago. And the thing is, if you're spending this amount of money on streaming services, I haven't dared add this up because my missus does like Paramount Plus, she does Disney Plus, Amazon Prime we have Netflix, all these random ones I've never heard of. Lionsgate was one, Stars Play.
I've never heard of those. Yeah.
Random show.
She's addicted.
You name it, Dan's got it.
Exactly, whether I want to or not. But the thing is, if you're the same, because they all add up, don't they? I remember years ago it was the cable cutting scene, they called it, getting rid of like Sky or NTL version.
Cut the cord, save everything's money. Going to be cheaper.
But definitely isn't now. I mean, it's easy to spend like up to £100 a month on all these services, even more than a Virgin Media subscription, for example. So if you are paying all that money, there is something incredible that Netflix has got more than 18,000 titles globally, but there is only something like around 6,000 of them available here in the UK. So you're literally paying for shows and missing out on thousands of libraries of shows that you could be watching unless you use our sponsor, ExpressVPN. Now, ExpressVPN not only makes it, worth your while, works with you to save your money and get value on these streaming services, but it's so easy to use as well, isn't it? Because really, the way it does it is it changes your location.
Yeah, so you can kind of access new content and change which country you're in, which basically means it thinks you're in another place. You can pick your movie that's not available in other ones. Well,
they've got servers in over 100 countries around the world. So that means thousands of new shows and never run out of stuff to watch. You've been watching whenever we talk to you, you're like, I've been watching so-and-so on the Brazilian Netflix or Canadian. What you've been watching this week? I assume you've been doing that again this week.
I was going to do an impression of it. Any of you beep and beep move and I'll beep every beep. Yeah, Pulp Fiction.
Nicely said.
Which is just such a good movie. Massively stylized. Quentin Tarantino classic. One of my favorites, Pulp Fiction. And you forget like how many iconic scenes are in that. And that is only available on Netflix Japan, amazingly. Oh, wow. So, been checking that out. But also City of God as well, seeing that we've been talking about Brazil. And, City of God is a very gritty tale about, Rio de Janeiro and the slums and crime, drugs, and Rocket as well, who's one of the main characters. And it's kind of like the downfall of an area, and a young photographer captures it all. And it's based on a true story as well, which is pretty amazing. If you've not seen City of God, I recommend it, but it's not for the faint-hearted.
Yeah.
Both of those films are for the faint-hearted, actually.
So, again, I mean, you hear about these, and, a lot of them aren't on British or American services, but they are on Netflix libraries around the world. Doesn't just work with Netflix either, Disney Plus, BBC iPlayer, lots more as well. Dead easy to use, literally the press of a button, isn't it? And works on all your devices, your phone, smart TV apps as well, your computer, consoles, and they're completely encrypted and actually blazing fast speeds as well. Streaming HD, no buffering, nothing like that. So if you want to try out ExpressVPN and get value for money on these streaming services that we're paying for every month, why don't you give ExpressVPN a try? It pays for itself. So use our link, expressvpn.com/retro. And of course, we've got your great offer. Using that link, they'll know that we sent you, helps out the podcast, and you'll also get an extra 3 months for free on top of a 1-year plan. So go to expressvpn.com/retro, and a massive thank you to our friends at ExpressVPN for their continued support. All right, then next, 2 massive guests on the show talking about the Bullfrog days and, of course, their incredible new studio that's now part of Sega 2 Point with our special guest, Mark Webley and Gary Carr, next on the Retro Hour podcast.
You're listening to the Retro Hour podcast, and we're here with Mark Webley and Gary Carr. And they're, Bullfrog chums back in the days, but they've come to found a brand new studio, and a fantastic studio, actually. A lot of people really love their games. 2 points. And, with the Retro Hour, we've always got a question that we ask our guests first. And, you guys are going to have to decide who takes it first. I'd say, well, probably Gary. What was your first computer experience that you ever had?
I guess, like most people, I think we had the grandstand tennis game, plug in, play, back of the TV. That would have been in the sort of 70s, mid-70s, something like that. Pong game. And I was living in a seaside town, so we had lots of arcades around. So I was lucky to play lots of cool games. I suppose the earliest I remember were things like Shark Attack, which wasn't even really computer graphics. It was projected, backlit picture show, really, with a gun you shot sharks with. I think it came out around about the time Jaws came to cinema, about 76. And then I guess the more sophisticated games came along, so I played a lot of... Well, I played Space Attack, which was the knockoff version of Space Invaders, but I think it was a better game. I thought the waves were a bit better. And then my favourite, probably not long after that, was Tempest, and I played a lot of Missile was it Missile Command or Missile Attack? Yeah, no, okay. With the rollerball, which obviously used to blister your hand if you got your skin caught down the side.
That's what happens when you got baggy skin on your hands.
Yeah, I do have baggy skin. I've got notoriously saggy fingers. I used to.
People are going to be picturing that in their head now.
So it sounds like you spent a lot of time in the arcade then back then, Gary. I did. I mean, seaside towns in the winter are quite dull. So, I used to go down the arcades. In fact, I was more of a gamer then than I probably ended up being and for a job. But, I like a lot of teenage and slightly younger kids. I love going down the arcades because it's just, hang out. What about you then, Mark? How did you get the bug for it, Mark?
Yeah, well, it was not dissimilar. I grew up in a different seaside town down in Folkestone, and there was amusement arcades all over the place. So I remember having this playing on anything. If I had some money, I would go on an arcade machine, which would be a game, and then also the gambling machines, the one-armed bandits. And I sort of came to a realization that I just don't know why I was going on these money-winning machines, the potential of the lure of winning some money and never doing so, and then just focused on the games, and they were brilliant. The ones I remember really liking at the time was a game called Boot Hill, and it was kids kept playing that over and over when I could, and I'm not even sure when that was. It was, but it used to go do 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 if you're dead. So that was quite a good game, and sort of had the Pac-Man stuff. And then I guess later on, my brother got ZX Spectrum, and so I had to play on that. I wasn't a programmer, but I typed in from one of the magazines one of the programs. It took all day coding in something from a magazines used to print out code listings, and that certainly I had to switch it all off at the end of the day. So that was pretty disappointing, but it was fun, and I guess that was it really. Nobody had computers. Some kids had. The real nerdy kids at school had some programmable calculators, and they could kind of program little games on them. But that was way above me at that time. So, yeah.
Well, let's talk about our own personal first home systems. Then, do you remember yours, Mark? What you got then? After your brother's Spectrum?
I guess probably an Amiga. I guess. Yeah, nice. An Amiga 500. I guess that's a proper computer. Yeah, I mean that was pretty powerful. I'm not sure I had anything before that really. What about you, Gary?
Even though I'm a little younger than Mark, not much, but a little younger, I started quite a bit earlier. So I worked on 8-bit games. So I worked on as Mark said, the Spectrum, Amstrad, CPC, and the Commodore 64. Even the IBM green screens and the BBC Acorn, those kind of things. So I was sort of around the mid-80s I started. So I didn't have a machine before that. In fact, I failed computer graphics. I'm an artist, by the way. Originally, I was an artist animator. And I failed computer graphics at art school because I couldn't be bothered waiting for all my stuff to render out. It took like a month for anything to, eventually get printed. So I just didn't bother doing it. So I didn't really have the inclination to go and make a career out of computers. But when I started, I was just blown away by how quickly you could make things. Luckily, I had some really, really good people around me who built some really cool editors. So we were building games quite quickly from literally idea to completion in 3 months, which now just seems ridiculous, on all sorts of different formats as well. So all those, I suppose, first machines that a lot of people of our age would have got for Christmas, I was lucky enough to get paid to play with them. So nice.
Well, let's talk about your entry into the industry then. So I know you started working with Palace Software, and you worked on the legendary game Barbarian. So how did you get your foot in the door with them, and what was it like working on that game?
I made a couple of films, 4 films at art school. 2 were animated films, 2 were live action films. And I applied for a job at Palace Films, who made things like A Company of Wolves, When Harry Met Sally. And they used to distribute movies like Evil Dead. They did things like Razorhead. And they were just a really kind of cool indie film company. And I thought I was applying for a film role, but they put me in the games team. And it all started there, really. So I accidentally got a job in computer games rather than movies.
And, it's all been a series of accidents, really.
My life is a series of wrong doors, really, taking the wrong door, and then it working out to be the right door in the end. But yeah, that was it. But there were so many talented people back then. I'll just call out a few because, people like Dan Malone, Stan Skembry, Richard Leinfelder, so many, Joe Walker. There were so many fantastic, talented people who we were just given the keys to the creative door. I mean, there wasn't anybody telling us what to do. We were just told to go and have fun and see if we could make something out of these little computer systems, because it was a very punk rock company, Palace. I mean, they were kind of co-owned, or they came out of Virgin, effectively. And because Virgin was set up by doing exactly that, just publishing some pieces of music that went on to make them millions, they wanted games to be that next, if you like, wave of success. So we were just given freedom to do anything. We were young, so we looked right. We looked kind of cool, and there was no censorship. It just didn't exist back then. You could do anything, and nobody questioned what the content was. So Barbarian, we just exploited sexuality, we exploited horror, and no one was going to tell us not to. So I'm not saying it was the most politically correct game in the world, but every 14-year-old boy, because it was boys then, wanted it. They wanted the poster more than the game.
Yes.
and that was the kind of idea behind Virgin as well, like you said, Punk, and with them promoting the pistols and stuff, and that
exactly
going into video games world.
I remember playing Nine Inch Nails too loud one day, and Richard Linefelder was technically my boss, but there wasn't really bosses. It was who shouted the loudest, to be honest. And I think he was 1 year older than me at the time. I think he was 21 and I was 20. And he obviously planned it. He ejected the cassette because I was playing it really loud. And he literally took it out of the cassette player. He got a 9-inch nail. And this is just the wonderful poetic justice. And he just nailed it into the wall. He said, I'll give you 9-inch nails. That was kind of, I remember looking after another guy's plant for 2 weeks when he was on holiday and getting berated for it. So, and it actually improved and looked beautiful. And then at the end of it, they just got lighter fuel out and just set it on fire.
Oh, wow.
And it was just kind of like that. There was nobody really in charge of the children. So we just did what we wanted to do. But it was a really creative time and some of the best fun I'd ever had.
Well, Mark, how did you get involved with the video game world? And also, do you remember the first time you met Gary?
I remember the first time I saw Gary. I mean, my route was basically I did maths and computing at university, and then I did my industrial year at IBM and realised I didn't want to be a programmer. So I tried to get a creative job, and I applied to about 20 different advertising agencies, and they're all kind of like, analyse this advert and write this and write that. And all 20 of them, none of them even replied and rejected me. So I ended up getting a job programming business software, and that was actually, I quite enjoyed that. And then eventually I had a demo. I was working on a demo with a friend of mine who's now worked at Bullfrog and Lionhead, and he's at 2 now, a guy called Alan Wright. And we presented it to Bullfrog, and I think I'd met Gary before that. I don't know if you remember. You probably wouldn't remember seeing me, Gary, because I had a suit on at the time, and you couldn't see people in suits, although you said you could. Gary had a mohawk, and it looked quite scary. I was walking up this narrow staircase, and he's coming down. Yeah, he's a sweet guy, really, but he did look a bit scary. So. Yeah, but that's the first time I saw him at the Bullfrog offices. And my foray into it is I had been programming and playing games and actually making it a game which was probably based on a Space Hulk. It was a turn-based for Marines. I mean, we didn't have a license or anything. We were just kind of making this game up, and we presented it to Bullfrog, and I think pretty much everyone in the studio, I think there's probably about 5 or 6 of them, had a look at it and talked to me, and I didn't get the job I thought there might be a chance that they'd go, oh, this is great, well, we'd like to you to come work here and finish it. But I got a job at Bullfrog doing something different, which was setting up the conversions team. So we were taking all the games, like when I joined, the Populous 2 had been out.
Yeah, on Amiga it had, yeah.
On Amiga, yeah. So that was written in assembler, and so my first job was porting it to the PC. And I don't know, you didn't work with me on that, did you? Do some graphics?
No, what used to happen was I worked with Peter primarily, but Sean and Glenn tended to work independently, but I was kind of Peter's artist, and we were kind of running ahead of the next game. And by the time it came to porting, I suppose we were on the next one. So I'd done Powermonger.
You were on Powermonger. I think Powermonger hadn't come out when I started. So
I think it had on Amiga.
Oh, maybe.
I think we did. Weirdly, I think we didn't do the PC port till after Populous 2 because it wasn't quite as successful. So it's weird order of things back then.
So Gary, you were kind of focused on the Amiga releases then, I guess.
Yeah, that was the lead platform then. And then everything else went to Mark Mark was, by the way, when Mark came in to show his game off, I was one of the people that wanted to hire him. There was a strange thing about Bullfrog then. people didn't want it to grow. And anybody coming in, doesn't matter who you were, you could have been Bill Gates, you wouldn't have got a job if it was left to everyone to vote. And Peter used to be quite democratic and give everyone a vote. And I voted that Mark could come in. But I'm not saying who didn't vote you in, Mark.
Glenn, obviously.
You can imagine.
Yeah, Glenn was so grumpy, yeah.
Was the idea like keep this small kind of magical team together?
Kind of, but there was also, I think, it was starting to become successful. And actually, it had become successful before I joined even. Populous had come out round about the time I joined. So I worked on the data disk only at the very back end of it, like hardly touched it. The Promised Lands data disk. So they'd gone from having no money at all to suddenly there was money swilling around the bank account. So I think the more people that would come in, the more it would have to get, the cake would have to get carved up, I guess. So that was my view, that they were trying to keep the numbers down so they could have more of the share of the pie.
That's probably Glenn, but I mean, certainly as the success came, we kind of, and the teams, I guess, needed to get a bit bigger because you guys, it was a tiny little company at the time. But I guess even now, we kind of, there's something nice in small, and I know we're not tiny small, but I mean compared to some teams we are. But it's kind of nice to be able to talk to everyone, and having a small team, 4 or 5 is quite it's quite magical. Yeah.
By the way, Glenn is lovely and is one of our greatest friends. We're just slightly ribbing him because just in those early days, it was incredibly precious. And I think everybody just didn't want us to change the chemistry as well. So bringing in, and you're a bit of a grown-up, Mark, actually, because I think you'd had some.
I'd had a proper job, and
you'd had a proper job, and you were given a role that had sort of a manager kind of title as well. So I think it was just difficult. This is when you actually came in to do the head of conversions. You're head of something. None of us had been head of anything at that point. We were all just, devs. So it was when Bullfrog was starting to grow up a little bit. Its success meant, all these new machines were coming out, and also success in Japan. If you remember, Mark, it was like Login was basically quite a big Japanese computer game magazine, and Bullfrog pretty much owned the magazine. So the Japanese people were playing lots of the early games. So that level of success meant, there were lots of different SKUs of the games to go on to. So Mark had to sort of manage what we were going to do in-house and what we would farm out to other people and things like that.
So in 1993, Bullfrog had one of their absolute classics release with the incredible Syndicate back in the day. I know Ravi's a massive fan of that, so he's probably going to really geek out with you guys about that in a moment. But I know, Mark, you worked on Syndicate as a producer on that game. So what memories have you got of working on it, and what were the challenges of developing that game? It was very ambitious for the time.
It was, and what I did on it was one of the conversions, of course. It was written on, well, in fact, it was originally being worked on the piece, the Amiga, and then the team, Sean Cooper and Peter, converted it over to PC, released on PC. So one of my roles was converting it, the finished game, back to the Amiga, because of course we were still supporting that. But Gary, I mean, you must remember, I mean, because that predated my joining of Bullfrog, and in fact, you guys were working on that when I presented my 4 Space Marine based game. So you kind of had something that was slightly better than what I had.
Yeah, it was like, to be honest, do you remember if it was called Syndicate then? I don't think it was.
Was it Bob or Quaz?
Well, there was Quaz was one name, Bob was another. The one I started was called Cyber Assault. So when I started on it, it was the very first thing I worked on at Bullfrog, because Peter and the team had gone away to a game show in America. It wouldn't have been E3, it'd have been something prior to that. And I was just given a quick briefing from Peter to go and think of a squad-based 4-player, actually it was 4 controllable character game, squad-based game called Cyber Assault. And he wanted it to be 3 sprites high. And of course, the characters ended up being very small. But back then, they were going to be quite large characters. And that got shelved not long after, really. We didn't do too much. I had characters running around a flat area shooting. And then we put it down. And what used to happen with Syndicate was it was the game we picked up and put down when something else came along. So it went through being a squad-based game into a sideways scrolling platform game, and it was called Bob. And it was called Bob because it stood for blue and orange bloke. And then Quaz. And then a game came out called Command and Conquer, I guess. It might have been what was before Command and Conquer? It was
Dune
something.
2.
Dune.
Yeah. Dune. It was Dune. So that was the real kind of inspiration for Sean to pick up the game again and go, no, we're throwing everything away and we're starting again, because this is really his passion was that game. And later Command and Conquer, which probably came out after, but it was basically Dune was also his influence, right? So he kind of started putting this together with Peter, and they basically worked in the evenings on it, not during the day. Peter was, I think at the time, doing the PC version of Powermonger. I'm trying if I'm getting my dates right. Maybe even early Theme Park. And it was Sean who was kind of doing a lot of the legwork, but with Peter basically coming in the evening and going, I like this more, I don't like that, and then getting into the coding with... They were a brilliant coding team, by the way, Sean Cooper and Peter Molyneux. They just fed off each other, smoked huge amounts of tobacco, and just worked late into the night. And that game was brilliant. They were both quite feisty people, really, with each other in a positive way. You know, they laughed and they were all kind of like challenging each other, whether it was squash or just, you know, who could code quicker and who was better at whatever. They were very competitive. And I think the game is that energy, really.
Technically, it's insane. What you can do on such a small system, and having such a developed world in there.
Look, I mean, those two were geniuses at that point in their career. I mean, you had Peter, who was probably the hardest working person I've ever worked with. I mean, he just didn't stop. And Sean Cooper, who literally could learn to do anything in about a week. I mean, he learned to play keyboards in a week. He learned to play guitar in a week.
I remember his guitar playing. I remember he got himself a nice guitar, learned to play really well, really quickly, and then gave it up because he said, I realised I couldn't be the best in the world.
Yeah, that's what it was like.
He just gave up.
He became a supermodel in a week. Not kidding. Yeah. He did, yeah. He would do all these things. He was like a sponge. But I can tell you something about him. As brilliant as he was, he had no common sense or any kind of perception of what's going on in the world. I remember him saying how great it was at the time that we had a great prime minister in Margaret Thatcher, and it had been about 8 months since she had left, and it had been John Major in charge of the country. He had no idea that had happened, right? But no, they were fantastic together, really good.
I was going to say, Mark, as well, you had like challenges porting it, I guess, and hitting different systems like the 3DO.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Yeah,
and also Syndicate American Revolt as well, doing the kind of add-on later on.
Yeah, that was I was working mainly with a guy called Mike Diskett, who later on went to work, set up a company with Gary Mucky Foot, so that those guys worked together. And on the 3DO as well. Did we do the 3DO?
You did do.
We did a few things on 3DO. It's such a...
You did Theme Park as well.
Yeah, I don't think anyone ever bought it, but yeah, no, that was they were all tricky. I mean, doing things like Theme Park onto the SNES and the Mega Drive was kind of that was stuff we did internally, and so much of it is you're just starting again, rewriting chunks of code. And I think we did a Mega Drive version of Syndicate as well, and you kind of have to just rethink things a bit, but without trying to, go too far away from what's so cool about the game. Yeah, they're all challenges, but yeah, as Gary said, really smart bunch of people. As the team grew, it grew really slowly, but everyone there was, except for me and Gary, were really smart.
I thought the SNES version of Syndicate was pretty unique as well. And it had a very kind of theme parky look about it.
It's pretty much just starting again. You kind of there's no code you can use, and I guess some of the graphics
You're right.
you'd have to be reworked because it's completely wrong. So yeah, it's just a lot of stuff that needs to be worked through, and it take quite a long time. But I guess the games didn't take as long to make originally then as they seem to do now. But
You're right. For an artist, it was a great living because I must have worked on so many other games that I had nothing to do with, just to say, oh yeah, I'll put the, Master System version of your game, because you really couldn't take anything over. Pretty much everything had to be completely reconfigured. I mean, obviously, they dump all the texture sheets, sprite sheets out, but you had to, completely rework everything. So there was quite a good living out of just being a conversion artist back then. So I used to kind of do that in the evening sometimes. I worked on Bitmap Brothers games, and I did Xenon 2 on the Master System, and I didn't do anything original. I just kind of refactored. You kind of like I suppose a renovator if I'm trying to think of something to compare it to, someone who's painting over someone else's work and trying to do it justice, if it's old, so there was a lot of that going on.
Well, I guess in some cases,
code's the same, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think we were putting games onto the Mac as well, and that wasn't even grayscale; it was black and white, and there was just two colors. So I don't know if you were working on any of that graphics.
Yeah, but, I did some. I did some of the PC, whether it be the different graphics card versions of the PC version and the Mac versions. Yeah, your department when you started it was like, oh, thank God. I don't have to do that anymore. Again. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about theme parks. Obviously, that was a massive hit, and again on so many different platforms. What did you think of the idea of theme park, Gary, when you first heard about it?
We all know what Gary thought.
No, I hated it. I just thought how cool we'd been making all these great
killing games.
Yeah. Like proper. I thought Populous, the original Populous, and it was nothing to do with me or Mark. We weren't there, but I just thought it was a revolutionary game. It was like a proper attempt to put. I don't know. It felt grown up to me. It felt like a real genius idea. And then Powermonger in itself, was quite a brave attempt at a sort of a strategy game. Some of it was kind of randomly generated, but there's still a lot of really cool things. And you really felt like you were kind of campaigning and moving across a vast, endless world. And all that sounded like, oh, I want to make these games. And then when Peter came up, he'd gone to Japan with the success of everything we'd done. And he just saw lots of vivid color games, lots of games with colorful backgrounds and, sprites with, the head was the same size as the body kind of style, which, we all recognize today. It's kind of still there. And he just wanted to and also theme parks were massive. He went to a few and they were just popping up everywhere. So he could just see this kind of opportunity. And I just hated it. It was awful. And I think I worked for it on my own as well because Peter was still finishing something. I still think it was Powermonger on PC because it was a bit of a pain to get on there. And I was on my own for about 4, 5, 6 months. We all went to theme parks, which was fun. We all went on these kind of trips.
Research trips.
Yeah.
Research trips. In fact, I went to Euro Disney when it wasn't open. We got to go on all the rides when it was basically still in development. That bit was good. I didn't mind doing all that stuff.
No, but you didn't. Yeah,
but the game was just.
It's just the artists that went. Peter and you artists who went to.
Yeah, one animator, me and Paul McLaughlin. Yeah. Yeah,
you need inspiration to make. Yeah, boo-hoo.
But I didn't fall out with anybody. I just thought I can't work on this game. It's too childish. I thought it was a really childish game. I left, and as I said earlier, I'd done some sort of freelance work with the Bitmap Brothers, and I knew them anyway from the 80s. We used to drink together, and we were very similar studios with sort of same kind of sensibilities. And I just thought, I'm just going to go to the cool company. And then, that year and a half I left, they released Theme Park. My work's still in it, but
we
Finn
deleted
Maggetti
it,
finished
Gary.
it. No, I thought you had done until I actually saw it. You released Theme Park, you released Syndicate, and you released Magic Carpet, and it was all in that 18 months I was away. So
I was wondering, were there any like theme ideas that didn't go ahead, or were any people making like crazy suggestions?
Well, Gary and I, after we'd done theme hospital, we had a whole bunch of ideas that we thought, oh, this would do theme prison, theme resort, and we kind of imagined going on, and it was, if the game had something on it that said designer series. I don't know where that came from, the marketing people, but we kind of thought, well, we'll carry on with the designer series because it's really good fun, and that was our passion for doing these kind of games, which eventually brought us all back together at 2 Point. But yeah, I don't know, Gary, whether there were any.
Well, I think the bit we've missed out is I came back, obviously, and Mark, you were running that team, and it wasn't a great team, let's be honest. It was a very small team.
Do you mean the what team are you talking about? The hospital team?
Hospital team.
That was just me. Thanks very much.
Yeah, exactly. So, Mark, when I came back with my tail between my legs, I knew Mark, obviously. We really got on, and Peter put us together. But it was clear to me and Mark, I think, maybe more me than you, Mark, because I think you were always a bit more positive than I was. But I kind of thought, this is the Z team. This is me being put in the crappy team because I went away, and there were a lot of really smart people still there and some new people, but none of them were on this project. It was Mark just plugging away, making this game. And
I didn't know you felt that way, Gary, about me.
Yeah, I loved you. I just thought theme hospital, it doesn't even make sense. Theme park makes sense. Theme hospital doesn't make sense. Everything about it just felt like an absolute turkey. I thought it was the worst idea
worst idea according to you since theme park, of course, and because you couldn't really leave again, could you? It'd been too embarrassing.
No, I don't be ridiculous. Yeah. So I was kind of stuck with it. But I guess, Mark and I did a lot of research, and it was going to be originally a serious hospital simulation game. I remember doing my original graphics for it. I tried to do as realistic as possible, and we were going to do real illnesses and so we had to go and research lots of things at hospitals and work out how the business of running a general hospital worked. We spent time with, hospital managers. We spent weeks researching how we were going to gamify it, and it was just ridiculous.
Yeah, and it looked. I mean, the hospitals kind of look pretty dull, don't they? And I guess our game looked like that as well. But I mean,
it
did really. But it's just kind of walking around and going, "Oh my god, it's just corridors, isn't it?" It's and then hoping to see some cool machine that goes bing, but there wasn't any, and there was a few, of course. But I mean, I guess the big scanners were the most exciting looking things. But generally,
in fact, in hospital work, the scan machine, the cardiography machine from Theme Hospital, this is, guys. That's what the whole game. I don't know if you remember, they look kind of realistic.
Yeah, they're like a very different kind of style to the actual drawing.
They were assets made when the game all looked like that, and it was only when we decided to change it into this kind of made-up illnesses, made-up cure thing that we veered away from. We went all Heath Robinson and Willy Wonka.
Well, I guess the diagnosis stuff is kind of real world-ish with like a running machine.
Kind of, but a lot of it, even when we started to bring in that change of direction, we then didn't really go back to it. So we built the desks, we built the wards, we got the scanning machine, and we got the cardiography machine. And I think we built a radiator as well. In fact, the radiator was done by a work experience guy called George Zamowski.
And they're quite like boring elements, but they were really good actually, and really important to make people comfortable in the rooms, and then the whole drinks machine aesthetic and all the kind of ideas of keeping the place clean and stuff that all fell into theme park.
No,
as
you're
well.
right.
Really
And I
went
tell you, I tell you what else is, and we say this to our artists now, is when sometimes when people assume we have got to be all wacky and crazy and zany and all those crappy words, right? You have to ground all humor in reality, and it has to be realistic to a degree. And then when you put those twists in, it kind of accentuates it. And sometimes, even 2 Point, we're guilty when we make our games of going, there's not enough of this based in reality. We need to put some more real things into it. Not if everything is,
zany,
surreal and zany, it isn't funny. You've got to know where to put the gags, right, in the game. And Hospital was great at that, partly by accident because we built a more played straight game initially. But you're right, we did a lot of things like housekeeping of the game.
Yeah,
was bins, radiators.
The kind of meat of the game was
the meat of the game.
There,
the minute to minute stuff was quite straight, wasn't it? And then punctuated with bloaty head, slack tongue, hairyitis, jellyitis, whatever.
I also think the whole idea of the game, when you're playing it, you relaxed, you've set up your place, and then suddenly chaos happens. There's an outbreak. There's a helicopter landing with loads of people.
Vomit wave.
yeah, and just kind of the breaking up of that normality was really important.
Yeah, it was. I mean, Mark and I had a really good. I knew when I worked with Mark, immediately knew we were right for each other to work, because I think we just had the right kind of personality for each other. There was a lot of listening to each other's ideas, and back then there weren't designers. It wasn't a title you had. I mean, Mark was more on the production programming side, and I was on the art side, animation side. But I think the ideas thing was just something. I mean, to be fair to Mark, he collated it without a doubt. There was no way I could say I collated the game. Mark did. Mark would hold a meeting on a Monday down the pub, and I think you were almost like the editor, really.
Yeah, well, it was such a small team. It's kind of, I guess, easier
but
to
that
just...
was your kind of production sensibilities. I think you were really good at kind of, pulling the best bits together at that point.
Well,
but
I remember us all coming in. I mean, I say all, there was like 4 of us. We came in one weekend because we were trying to get to Alpha, and there's this milestone where kind of everything's done. And we kind of came in and we were working, and we kind of, because there wasn't any real proper processes, we kind of go, I think we're Alpha, aren't we? And we go, I think we are. And it was kind of weird, wasn't it? It's just...
you had a notebook.
Yeah.
You were really good at taking notes. Do you remember? I mean, you still are, right? You do take a lot of notes. In fact, your note-taking's you're quite proud of it.
I've written notes here as we're talking as well.
But that was it. I mean, basically, it was what's everyone doing? What were you doing last week? What you got to do next week? What did we agree in the last week? Mark had it all in front of him, and there was a point when you had nothing. You turned a page, and
I think we're done. Yeah,
and you went, I think we're done. It felt weird. So then it was all about the balance and the
bug fixing and stuff. Yeah.
Well, that's one thing I'm interested in as well, because obviously it was a big game, and set in the hospital, there's huge levels as well. Was it a bit of a balancing act trying to make the game fun without being like really resource heavy?
When you say resource heavy, in terms of what using the PC,
like the kind of like the spec you needed on.
we were at a point where everyone else was starting to use 3D, so we basically had just our engine. The heart of our engine was just a sprite draw. So, and that had been around and developed by Peter and Glenn for ages. So that's kind of stuff was pretty efficient. So we didn't really actually run into any problems of it being slow. And in fact, we were taking what Theme Park hadn't done is put a limiter in it, and I'm so glad we did, because put a limiter in, because a couple of years later the games are running 10 times the speed they should be. So no, we didn't really have too much of a problem. I guess the levels weren't that big. They were pretty efficient sprite draws.
That sprite draw, though, Mark, was written by primarily Peter. I think you're right. Glenn had owned it and coded in it, and I think you had as well. But it was everything it did was under direction of either me primarily me, to be honest, because not many other people used it. I imagine Finn at some point might have said, I need a function that does this, because it was effectively the setup for the things you saw on the screen. So what the artist needed to set up was in the sprite drawer. So all the keys were just whatever the artist wanted the key to be. So none of it was using any protocols that you use today in any kind of art tool. It was completely non-transferable skills. It was a bespoke engine that drove the moving parts of the game. And it was asked for primarily by the artist, where, I need a function that does this. I want to change overlay sprites. I want to be able to do a sequence. It's a sequencer, basically.
I guess that's the bit that we did develop quite a lot.
Yeah, you did, yeah.
Where we were trying to get, two sprites. I talk about this quite a lot throughout my life, and nobody kind of ever realizes how good it is, but it's rubbish compared to what everyone else does. But we had like a sprite of a desk and a sprite of a doctor, and of course, if you kind of put the sprite in front of it, you're trying to get the doctor to sit down at the desk. And of course, he walks in front of the desk and he goes behind it and then pulls a chair out, sits down. And doing that with sprites, there are two separate sprites, is quite tricky. So the thing that we'd kind of developed was this thing called the complex engine, which was basically would take two sprites, and then when they got to when the character that's interacting with the desk got to the right point, it would swap it out, obviously just within a frame, to a combination of the sprite and the doctor. So Gary had to set all that stuff up, but it worked really nicely, I think. And, I don't think anyone has ever looked at it and gone, oh, that's clever. But
it is, because
it's really
think about it this way, right? We're making games, in essence, inspired by games we made 25 years ago. And we still can't make people in our games today go to a door, drop the handle of the door, pull it open, walk through it and close it behind them, right? We were doing that 25 years ago because of your engine. Mm-hmm. It allowed the artist to completely accurately, pixel perfectly accurately line these things up. So weirdly, it was quite a technical job for me back then, because I had to use Mark's system, the sequencer, and I had to sort of set up these things to work. So if somebody ever sat at a chair, I had to set it up how they got it to the entry and exit point, open a filing cabinet, go through a door, get into a machine, whether they're going to autopsy, how they got in, how they got out, what they were looking like.
Gary, they never got out of autopsy.
all that kind of pathfinding and stuff.
But all that stuff, Mark just said to me, I don't care what it does, but I need to know where I'm going to code the person to get to the entry point and where the exit point is, and everything during the activity.
It's up to you.
Gave me the ability to do with it what I did. So, from game point of view, it was about the most pure programmer artist game together, because it was quite technical to set these things up. Because obviously, I had to do male, female, all ethnicities, different clothing types, different props. Someone might have glasses on, someone might have a cane or a hat. So all of these I had to do that in the sequencer. So every single variant, which Mark used to randomly generate, I had to make sure that every variant worked. And only I could verify that, because I kind of owned that part of it. So it was 100%. Mark and I were back to back. We sat back to back. And that was the guts of the game, really, because it was just the sequencer driving the navigation into the events out of that and the simulation changing. So if it broke, I was like, as much of a, normally artists don't break the game because they're not as in the guts. Well, the point is, I think I probably had more bugs than anybody, because I had to sort of set it up. But I really enjoyed it. It was 100% effort from us, because we felt we were the underdogs at the studio at the time. You've got to remember, it was Dungeon Keeper, it was Populous 3 at that point, it was Magic Carpet 2, Syndicate Wars. There were other games which never came out, which were looking amazing, like Creation, and another game called
Gene Wars came out, didn't it, as well?
Gene Wars came out as well. But we just weren't very flashy looking. We were sprite-based. And we just didn't expect to get, any kind of press interest in our game. So we just worked really hard to make it a good game.
I'm quite interested in that, the last era of kind of Bullfrog and kind of transitioning into Lionhead, because obviously you went with Peter Molyneux and you worked on Black and White. So what was it kind of like, that transition between the two companies, and what memories have you got of that time?
Well, that was me, because Gary went and co-founded, helped the guys run Mucky Foot. And for me...
That good he can't remember them.
I could remember. I just checking my notes to make sure I was right. So Peter was still finishing Dungeon Keeper as we'd finished Theme Hospital, and my daughter was born in the March, and I think the game came out in the March. So I kind of didn't really go back to the office that much. And then, we knew we were setting up Lionhead, and when I left, it was just really myself and Tim Rance were kind of doing a bit of programming, right? In some sort of...
Were you called Red Eye then?
We did, yeah, Red Eye. We didn't really have a proper name. We hadn't sort of settled on anything. And so we were kind of waiting for Peter to finish Dungeon Keeper. And so we were also having a bunch of meetings with EA about the publishing deal, which would help Peter leave EA/Bullfrog, and for us to set up Lionhead. So that was going on in the background. Peter was finishing off Dungeon Keeper, and they'd been moved out of, because they knew Peter was leaving. They asked him to go and work out of the office, to leave the office. So he went down to his house and took his team down there, and they finished it. And then just transitioning into Lionhead was really exciting. Again, it was a really small team to start with, just probably 4 or 5 of us, and it was slowly growing. In fact, we did talk to you, Gary, about you coming to join us as well. But
yeah, I remember.
Yeah, and
you did. I remember you did. I do remember that chat. Yeah.
But you chose the wrong route, and
another title worth mentioning definitely was Fable as well.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering, what do you think made Fable so popular?
It's a pretty good game.
I think I always think it was because back then RPGs were primarily PC and they were quite, I don't know, hardcore. And I think putting it on a console was quite unique, and making it accessible and not necessarily trying to be, for a particular type of player.
Trying not to be too nerdy as well, I guess, and being quite funny as well. I think there's a lot of humor in Fable as well, but it was a lovely game to play. So I think
it was a difficult game. It was never easy to make a Fable game. I don't think any of them were easy. Like, I think Hospital, for example, was a very smooth game to have worked on. A lot of my team worked on the Fable games when they got into that difficult period of finding the fun. And I don't think any of them went really smoothly. Even Fable 1 took a while, because it had been, it had different names. It was called a Project Ego and all sorts of things.
Wishworld,
And Wishworld. And it had been developed initially out of house by Big Blue Box under the, if you like, guidance of Lionhead, and then it had to be brought in-house to try and finish it. And they've all been difficult births, haven't they, Mark? There wasn't one smooth Fable.
Yeah.
They're all quite difficult games to make.
I mean, we were kind of working. I mean, I think for some of the Fable games, I think some of the team definitely felt burnt out, and there was always a lot more work to do than really we were able to do.
Well, let's give them credit. We were a first-party studio by the time of Fable 2.
Yeah.
And we were having to compete along with the Halo team, which had been Bungie, obviously, but then it had become the in-house, is it 343? Can't remember exactly the name. I think it's that. Turn 10 doing the Forza games, Epic doing Gears of War. These studios were like 500 to 1,000 people each. And Lionhead was still a couple of hundred people, and less than that working on Fable, probably 120 people on Fable. So we were doing, AAA games with a fraction of the headcount. So we were obviously going to hit turbulent water from time to time, trying to sort of hit release dates. And the release dates are really important for Microsoft, as there would be. They put a lot of money behind marketing and things like that. So I think it was always a bit of a shame that certain features didn't make the cut, and certain things promised didn't get done. But that was just, people don't realize how difficult it is when your team is a fraction of the size of some of the biggest studios around the world. We were never that big, Lionhead. Never big. I think the biggest headcount was about 350.
Yeah, that was over three games there, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, the fact that, obviously everyone's hyped for the new Fable game that's coming out next year. And it kind of feels like, the fact that we mentioned before that it's the 20th anniversary of Fable this year, or in terms of its release. I know you were saying before the call, Mark, that it was, it was worked on for a long time before that. I was just quite curious as to, that longevity there as well. I mean, why do you think people are still so hyped about it all these years on?
Interesting. I guess every year we've been waiting for the new Fable, and I guess a lot of people remember it fondly. So, and I don't know how wide that circle is of people that are really looking forward to seeing Fable come out. Whether it's sort of a mass market or it's kind of just us old hacks that remember it first time round.
I think it was ahead of its time in a lot of ways, Mark. It addressed sexuality, it addressed relationships. It didn't make you. It wasn't overly macho. It wasn't. I think
it had moral choices too. I think and consequences.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Of course, classically moral choices. But I think a lot. We've seen huge growth in players now in the last 15, 20 years, where it's no longer, as I said earlier, when I started, it was the domain of the smelly boy who played games in bedroom, and I think now games are for everybody.
Smelly girls as well.
Smelly girls, smelly boys, and just anybody, and it doesn't discriminate now. And I think Fable was really, really good at saying everybody will like something about this game. No matter what kind of gamer you are, no matter whether you're a boy, girl, or anything else, it's a game for everybody. So I think it did that. Not consciously, by the way. I think it just did that.
I think as well, it also had that kind of, obviously with it being, from you guys, had that kind of British charm and humour about it as well, which I'm wondering whether they're going to retain that in the new game or whether that'll be missing.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, I mean, a lot of that came from, Dean and Simon Carter were the two brothers that started Big Blue Box. Dean said,
and they're like characters.
They are really, yeah. So a lot of that humour. I mean,
and Mike McCarthy looks like something out. He was kind of an artist who did a lot of the concept work for it. He looked like he was out of Fable too.
I think it'd be interesting what they do with it. Whether I kind of seen the trailers, and I can't really tell whether they're going for the humour or they're going, okay, this is just a reboot and we're going to do something a bit different. But I think, anyone that remembers Fable, like we do, we're looking forward to it and hoping it's a great game. It'd be great to see it out again.
I'd rather it survive than doesn't. Yeah. And if it has to be another studio, I don't agree with the way the studio was closed. And I don't think it was the smartest idea to let all that experience, slip between your fingers. It needed to change, for sure.
Well, it needed to change away from a free-to-play game,
but that wasn't the decision made by the team. No. It was a decision made at a high level. So I think it's taken them a lot longer to get to probably where the game was already.
Yeah, I don't think anyone that was involved in any of the original stuff has been involved in the. I
think a few people have done some things, Mark.
Have they?
I'm not sure. I couldn't name. Yeah, I think none of the, if you like, the
designers,
the most well-known people. Yeah. But there are people who've gone over and worked on it, who've worked on the previous games.
Oh, really? I didn't realise.
Not many, and none of the leadership team, if you like, of that project. But it's just a shame that it had to be completely shut down and everything, be lost to then reboot something that perhaps isn't a million miles away from where we were anyway. So we'll see how it goes. I mean, I've got, Playground, a fantastic studio. Though, they're one of the best British studios out there. So I can't think of a better studio to take up.
Yeah.
You're so
Take it
polite.
Well, talking of fantastic British studios as well, you guys have your own studio, 2 Point Studios, which, I've heard so much about. I've played all your games. I absolutely love it. But I was interested in how you started it and also how Sega got involved and kind of what your vision for the company was.
I needed a job. It's one of the reasons. No, I wanted to work with Mark again. Mark and I kind of left Lionhead before it had finished. Mark, I think, 2 years before me. But the writing was on the wall, and Peter had gone at this point, obviously. Mark didn't probably want to be part of that.
Yeah, I'd had enough of computer games. I thought they were stupid, and I didn't want to do another one.
I was trying to put it nicer than that, but Mark was a bit disillusioned at that point, and I'd done some incubation work. I took over from a lot of stuff Mark had initially set up within Lionhead, which was a lot of the creative day was something Mark owned, and I took over that when you left, Mark, and we ran these wonderful incentives to let the studio, which was about, let's say, 250 people, create ideas, and a lot of that stuff was amazing, and a lot of good stuff came out of it. A lot of stuff should have come out of it, but I then went on to do an incubation team. I didn't work on the last Fable, and
Fable Legends.
I really wanted to get something new off the ground, and was frustrated how difficult that was. And I think that team also was under pressure to support Fable, and it just felt like, here we go again. So I left, and I contacted Mark and said, I think we can probably work together again. And I think we could do things that Lionhead used to do really well. We've missed out a big thing here. Mark and I worked on, along with Ben Huskins and a few other key people, like Mark Smart and Chris Norton, a lot of people that work with us today on a game called The Movies, which was probably the last
Little People game,
that Lionhead, aka Bullfrog, made. So we worked on that game. We loved that game. And when Microsoft bought Lionhead, they really bought the Fable brand, and everything else wasn't really core to their business. So Mark and I were a bit fish out of water, I guess, from there on in, and we didn't really get to make the games we were good at making. So we got together, and with a bit of convincing from me, if I'm honest, because I think Mark was probably less desperate than I was to keep working. We got in our cars, drove around the country, met a bunch of people, and started talking about doing a new studio based out of our history of making these games.
Yeah. And I guess you'd met Ben Hymers as well at Lionhead, and he's an old Theme Hospital fanboy, and he was a good programmer, a brilliant programmer. So he was kind of part of the mix once we'd kind of been able to get like a publishing deal together.
Yeah, I knew I couldn't do it without Mark, and I knew we shouldn't do it without Ben. So I kind of kidded Mark on a little bit that Ben was on board, and I knew Ben wouldn't be on board if we didn't get a deal. I think Mark found that out quite quickly, and I just needed to convince Mark that Ben was a really good, if you like, technical person, because we needed someone technical to sort of prove out our prototypes and that kind of thing. So,
well, we were thinking of doing a Kickstarter as well, weren't we? We kind of our route to get it off the ground was maybe a Kickstarter, and I didn't even know what that was really. I'd basically through the incubation work, we were looking at a lot of indie games to see why little games were doing quite well. So we were looking at things like Prison Architect, at the time, and it wasn't that long before things like Minecraft had just blown up, and there were a lot of real indie darling companies coming up and doing stuff with relatively small teams. And I guess what I was trying to do with the incubation team was see if we could spin something up, within the Lionhead studio. So
And then you realise a lot of these things were kind of crowdfunded. So I remember Ben and I were talking, and Ben was much more telling me that this was the way to go than me being the evangelist of it. And Mark was probably outside of that world for a bit too long to even know it was going on. So
I haven't even heard of the internet at this point.
Well, I was kind of wondering though, like Theme Hospital, it's one of those games that I could sit there and play any time, but modernizing it and making a new kind of title must have seemed like an obvious thing to you guys. But was it hard to convince other people that this would be really successful outside of that kind of world?
No, to be honest, we did speak to a few people, and I think the feedback was really positive. Maybe that's what you get all the time, but that they didn't actually have any money, because we didn't actually want a lot of money. In fact, we kind of really underestimated what we were asking. We are still very cheap as well, but we weren't asking for a lot, but we were almost at the point of going, right, we've given it a go. We're going to give up, and we were introduced via Ben, who'd gone to work. Where was he working, Gary?
He's working at a sports company that did
Motorsport Manager.
Motorsport Manager team.
Yeah, so they were signed to Sega at the time, and Christian basically introduced us. Head of the team introduced us. And they said, yeah, we're really interested. We were just talking the other day about, wouldn't it be cool to have a team doing stuff like Bullfrog used to? And there was us pretending we had a team. And we started talking to them for probably, I guess it was 9 months. They were just acquiring Amplitude at the time. So it kept going quiet for a while. But we were lucky. And we thought when we were introduced to Sega, we thought, there's no way, they're too big. They're not going to be interested in us. But they were. And I have to say, I've loved working with Sega. They've been amazing. I mean, a lot of changes over the time that we've been there. But as a publisher goes, probably the best ones we've ever worked with, Gary, would you say?
Easily.
Yeah.
I mean, they've kind of never tried to. A lot of publishers, and they don't intend to do this. It's not me trying to be sort of harsh on all the publishers, but when they publish you, they try and change you. Not consciously, but subconsciously, they want you to sort of do things a different way. And then you kind of wonder why they wanted to sign you in the first place. And Sega have never done that. They've kind of let us be us, and that's what's brilliant about them. And they don't try to sort of say, oh, we know better because we're paying the bills, right? They go, we're paying the bills, so hopefully we've made the right decision in trusting you guys.
I think as well it could have been just aimed as a nostalgic kind of look back at the past and not engaged any new users and people that didn't know of the series and are now kind of in the 2 world and kind of have really embraced it. How did you engage those new users?
We're kind of still not sure how many people remember the nostalgia of Theme.
As soon as I saw it, I was like, "Oh my god!" but I'm probably a rarity.
I think it. No, I think you're right. I think definitely Theme Hospital scratched the itch. What we've had to do, which is really difficult, is we've done that. You can't play that trick again. You can't say, hey, look, do you want another one of those? So all our games going forward and the ones we've got planned into the next decade are changing and evolving ideas. It's not, we don't want to do the same thing. Bullfrog never did the same thing. Now, it's difficult to get approval to make something completely different, but we want to evolve what we're doing. The first game was obviously tapping into our heritage, and that's fine because everyone needs to have something a card they can play, because there's a lot of games that come out a year, and if you don't do that, then you're just not going to get any visibility. So that was obvious, but I think everything we're doing now step changes into something more, more and more from basically not from from the history books, from our kind of great team that we've put together. And we're pulling these great new, games that are in the same. Yes, it's in the same genre. Yes, they're little people games, but they're kind of looking forward rather than back. And I think that's what we have to do. So, yes, I still think 2 Point Hospital is its own game. It's not a carbon copy of Theme Hospital by any stretch of the imagination, but it taps in to the nostalgia for sure. And why not?
Well, I think
we invented that between us, didn't we, Mark?
Well, we did.
We came up with that game. Why can't we? It's in our DNA to make something with that humour, with that charm.
And I think that also goes on to 2 Point Campus as well, because one mod I used to love was the Sims University, and that was one. Having traits in there, but also having more of a kind of focus on the relationships in a 2 Point Campus that is a lot more different than the Sims.
Being with your characters longer, yeah.
I think it's every time we kind of start a new game, we're always kind of trying to level up. I mean, and certainly getting closer to your characters with the students and having relationships, as we're just trying to do different things. It's a journey, and we've only taken 2 baby steps, and I think we're going to be talking about another step next month that we're doing. But we're always kind of thinking, what hasn't gone well? Why aren't more people playing it? Or what don't people like?
Always look at the negatives.
Yeah, we do, and I think trying to go for high quality. That's really important to us we play the game so much, and you were just playing it thousands of hours, and that's kind of nice that we've got a 2 Point, Gary and I, we're sort of studio heads, but we spend most of our time playing the games and not getting bogged down in lots of different
you've still got those kind of meat elements as well in there, like putting the bins in the right places and all that kind of stuff.
Yes. I mean, in fact, I was moaning about that today. I was actually literally saying
you're missing them.
I'm just sort of saying I don't want some of those real housekeeping things to get diminished. Sometimes you kind of want to evolve an idea up and relegate some things or push things out.
You didn't want toilets in the current game.
No, I didn't. I actually don't. I hate toilets in our games. I hate that. But that's another argument.
I could talk about the cubicles at Theme Hospital for hours.
Oh my God. To be honest, I just don't like... Anyway, I do agree with you. Absolutely, Ravi. There needs to be a very housekeeping thing to do, because I love weird things in sim games. I need to queue manage. I need to, occasionally direct my staff to do things, even though they're going to do it, right? I need to sort of be hands-on and play with it and tweak it to as much as I want to. And sometimes they're really menial things, like just tidying a room up in the game. So I do worry sometimes if we always put a bigger idea in, that we have to reject some of these simple pleasures of making sure, there's enough bins or enough fire extinguishers so things don't catch fire.
One day, Gary, we won't need bins in our game. You know it.
Well, guys, it's been absolutely incredible reminiscing with you, and amazing to hear the passion still burns strong as well, and we can't wait to see what is next from you guys when you can talk about it. So please do keep in touch with us, and obviously we'll be keeping an eye out as well. Thanks so much for coming on and reminiscing with us. It's been wonderful to chat to you both.
All right, thanks guys. Bye-bye.